Hello, folks. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law.
Love under will.
I thought today would be a nice day to do a discussion. It's not exactly a reading, but there will be a considerable amount of reading of the text, but also just a discussion and exploration of De Lege Libellum, which is, it was originally published in Equinox 3.1, the blue Equinox. And it's an interesting text because it's more, as is many of the texts in that issue of the Equinox, it's more oriented towards topics that pertain to OTO, unlike the rest of the Equinox, which is generally geared towards AA teachings. De Lege Libellum means the little book of law, and it's structured as an exploration of the 5 L's that we see in our creed, the light, life, love, and liberty of the law. And the structure of the book is interesting because it goes through each of these 5 L's in kind of a sequence, and each of the chapters themselves, or not chapters, sections, is again broken up into several sections that are kind of have a common form from one to the next. It's a Class E text, which, if you're familiar with with Crowley's class system for what category texts are in, Class E are like popular reading materials and tracts and so forth, which is hilarious because this text is written in some of the most stiflingly Victorian prose that you could want to not read. So it's curious who he was intending this for, even as the audience. And despite this, what I consider a deficit of plainly presenting material, I think it's a good book to explore because it is so concise. It's a little longer than we would be able to just like read from beginning to end through today, but it's let's see, it's like 25 pages. So for the comprehensive view of Thelema that it presents, I think it's really worth some study and exploration, and trying to get through the turgid Victorian prose in order to see the program as he's presenting it this succinctly. And it's as I mentioned, the structure is based on the 5 L's: light, life, love, liberty, and the law. And it's presented kind of as a pyramid in form, where that the law forms the base. It's the square of the pyramid, and each of light, life, love, and liberty are a side of that square based pyramid that form a point where they intersect at the top. And that point is likened unto Hadith, the infinitesimal. And there's a section in another book of turgid Victorian prose that is also very valuable, Liber Aleph, Liber 111. And there's a section on the pyramid that I thought would be relevant to read here because it gives a good visual for how to represent, or how to think of light, life, love, and liberty emanating from the law as its organizing principle. And this is chapter, don't know the number because this version doesn't have the chapter numberings, but before I go on, I just want to say this is, I am intending this more as leading a discussion rather than a lecture or something like that. So whomever has questions or comments they want to interject, just interrupt at any time. That's expected. So feel free to chime in. But this chapter is called De Pyramide, or however you pronounce it in Latin, on the pyramid. Now then, at last, art thou made ready to confront the pyramid, when thou art established as a sphinx. For it hath also the 4 square base of law, and the 4 triangles of light, life, love, and liberty for its sides, that meet in the point of perfection that is hadit, poised to the kiss of Nuit. But in this pyramid is no difference of form between the sides, as it is in thy sphinx, for these are wholly one, save direction. Thou art then a harmony of the 4 by right of thine attainment of adeptship, the crown of thy manhood, but not an identity as in Godhead. Therefore may it be said, from one point of sight, that thine achievement is but a preparation, an adornment of the bride for the temple of Hymen and his rite. Verily, O my son, I deem in my wisdom that this whole work of thy development to sphinxhood cometh before the work of theurgy. For the Lord descendeth not upon a temple ill-conceived, and builded awry, nor abideth in a shrine unworthy. Accomplish this then task in patience, with assiduity, not hasting furiously after godliness. For this is most sure, that to the beauty of a maiden answereth the lust of her lord, spontaneous and without effort or appeal of her contriving. Yeah, and as with most of the epigrams in Liber Aleph, there's a lot going on in that paragraph. But aside from the pyramid description as it relates to light, life, love, liberty, and the law, I also appreciate the direction on practice here, where it says that the work of thy development of sphinxhood, and in there he's talking about mastery. It's in the preceding epigrams, it's more explicative of what he means by sphinx here, but it's the mastery of light, life, love, and liberty, and saying that mastery comes before the work of theurgy, before offering yourself to God. That the God will not abide in a shrine unworthy, which is relevant again, and is spoken about more in De Lege Libellum, where each of the sections describing light, life, love, and liberty has as one of its main components a description of the practice of evincing that quality within yourself as part of your devotion to adeptship. When we recite the creed in the Gnostic Mass, we say light, life, love, and liberty. The word of whose law is Thelema. So it's light, life, love, liberty, and law. And the presentation in De Lege Libellum is in reverse order. It starts off being prefaced by the law and describing the law, and then goes on through liberty, love, life, and ending in light. And though it talks about the four sides of the pyramid, as being equals, it's really a matter of light being the first among equals. There's the description of light as it relates to these other three is that it is more of an emergent property that one experiences as the other three are mastered unto themselves, and really the mastery of light defies description and instruction, and is instead only to be intuited through the proper practice and administration of the other three.
So the light would be equated to no then? If you're going to go.
Oh, in terms of the Sphinx?
4 powers, yeah.
Let's see. It depends on. I don't remember how it relates in Aleph, because the qualities of the Sphinx and the elemental attributes of those vary depending upon where you're reading them.
In this essay, it's more associated with. In this essay, he associates it with the disc, so presumably silence and earth.
Yeah, when he describes the weapons at the very end, the magical weapons, yeah. But then, like in Aleph, and then in the Heart of the Master, it's the way the elements are ascribed to the powers of the Sphinx and the animals of the Sphinx vary. So that's its own mystery. But yeah, in here, it's definitely the disc is ascribed to light. So yeah.
In Liber Aleph, he associates it with fire and the lion and daring. Like, it's different in different texts.
Yeah. Which I've tried to puzzle out at points in the past and have not been successful in understanding the supposedly continuous line that runs through those shifts in attribution. So the aim of presenting these 5 L's is it's giving a guide to the overarching aim of the method of Thelema, which is the resolution of duality, the inherence of the 0 = 2 equation, where that you have these 4 L's that are the sides of the pyramid are presented as different views or meditations or depictions of axes upon which 0 and 2 are resolved. And it's through getting these studying and doing the practices around these presentations of the 0 = 2 equation that you are able to be Hadith and to form that peak at the top of the pyramid, the intersection of the 3 triangles, the 4 triangles in the top of the pyramid.
Can you give an example of that? You said the practices that help you understand that. Can you?
Yeah, so that's where I'm going to go now. Is so I think we'll skip the preface and go directly to liberty. And so each section, each of these 4 sections has a lengthy description where it kind of talks about the quality itself, and sometimes is very direct about how it fits in, how 0 equals 2 is used as a measure of it, and sometimes it's more oblique. But there's a description of the property, there's a section on the practices, and then there's further commentary. And then the section on light is, again, less structured and more diffuse, which is counterintuitive for light. And it also has some, it's kind of an addendum commentary on drawing out commonalities among the four altogether. So I'm going to read a bit of the section on liberty, and we'll see where that takes us. It is of liberty that I would first write unto you. For except ye be free to act, ye cannot act. Yet all four gifts of the law must in some degree be exercised, seeing that these four are one. But for the aspirant that cometh unto the master, the first need is freedom. The great bond of all bonds is ignorance. How shall a man be free to act if he know not his own purpose? You must therefore first of all discover which star of all the stars you are, your relation to the other stars about you, and your relation to and identity with the whole. In our holy books are given sundry means of making this discovery, and each must make it for himself, attaining absolute conviction by direct experience, not merely reasoning and calculating what is probable. And to each will come the knowledge of his finite will, whereby one is poet, one prophet, one worker in steel, another in jade, but also to each be the knowledge of his infinite will, his destiny to perform the great work, the realization of his true self. Of this will, let me therefore speak clearly unto all, since it pertaineth unto all. So this is a useful distinction that he's drawing out here. I think, Jim, didn't you write on this recently, the distinction between finite and infinite will, and kind of the paradox about how it's sometimes, true will is spoken of as this like practical thing, like what do I do with my life? And in other ways, it's when we speak of true will, or Crowley's writing of true will, it's this kind of abstract, ultimate concern of dissolution with the divine, of absolute total dissolution with the divine. And here he's making the explicit distinction that there is this finite will that is something that we think about every day. What am I doing with my life? Where's all this going? So on and so forth. But that that's important and necessary, and a step in the process of discovering infinite will. But that is the more time-bound, lifetime-bound orientation of the finite will. And so the rest of this is hewing to the notion of the infinite will. Any comments on that or questions? Or
yeah, they kind of contradict one another. Like the finite will is like, what do I need to be doing? What do I need to aim for? Whereas the infinite will is explicitly unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust of results. It's the way I think of it is, I mean, there are a few ways to think of it, but if you take the natural will and you perfect it, you devote it to Nuit. So it's on a trajectory toward its own dissolution, essentially.
Right.
Also, I just want to flag here, like, the kind of odd way that he's like, oh, you could be a poet or a businessman or a carpenter or a prophet or someone who sells shoes, just like throwing it in there.
As many of us are.
Yeah.
It's just another, what color is your parachute sort of thing. The the way, and we'll kind of get to this here in a few minutes when we talk about the practice associated with developing liberty, is the necessity of resolving the conundrum of the finite will is kind of just to get it out of the way in some senses. It's to keep that absence from being an impediment toward obtaining the infinite will.
He also has that description in one of the commentaries where he says, like, to the beginner, I would furnish this program of magic. First, discover what your will is, then trace that will back to its source in the true self. And basically, like, finding your finite will is sort of like the first step. And the whole point is to kind of trace back causation until you perfectly understand causation. And then that's like across the abyss.
As part of like the magical memory.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just kind of concurring with your idea that you're sort of doing that at the beginning to kind of have a basic self-understanding.
Yeah. And maybe that's in Thisharb, or I think there's something like that in Heart of the Master too.
And in the text we're talking about, it says that, like, he uses the analogy of driving a nail into a board instead of just kind of, being like a pin cushion sticking out everywhere that isn't going to connect with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I mean, that's a good analogy, but it's more intuitive to me if we're talking about the way that a seed needs to make a root into the ground before it can actually start growing leaves. So I think, like he's saying, it's we're not necessarily building a house, but we could be, but you have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that seems like an appropriate intuitive corollary, is to compare it to the foundation. And that also maps onto what he says at the very beginning here. It's the first step. Without liberty, you can't act. You can't act upon the rest of these qualities because you don't have the freedom to do so. And freedom here is, as we'll see in just a moment, is described a little differently than the colloquial sense, but it's very much in that vein where when you're rooted in the ground, when a seed is rooted in the ground, it has the constraint of being stuck right where it is, but that provides the freedom to grow. It's that constraint that and that devoted single-pointedness of contact with the earth that gives it the stability to grow upward toward the light. Let's see. So here he gets into how 0 equals 2 ties into liberty. Understand now that in yourselves is a certain discontent. Analyze well its nature. At the end is in every case one conclusion. The ill springs from the belief in two things, the self and the not self, and the conflict between them. This also is a restriction of the will. He who is sick is in conflict with his own body. He who is poor is at odds with society, and so for the rest. Ultimately, therefore, the problem is how to destroy this perception of duality to attain to the apprehension of unity. Now let us suppose that you have come to the Master, and he has declared to you that the way of this attainment, what hindereth you? Alas, there is yet much freedom afar off. Understand clearly this, that if you are sure of your will and sure of your means, then any thoughts or actions which are contrary to those means are contrary to that will. Let's see, so we'll skip down here. In our holiest book it is written, thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. Write it also in your heart and in your brain, for this is the key of the whole matter. And then we get into that description of the wooden nail. Here nature herself be your preacher, for in every phenomenon of force and motion doth she proclaim aloud this truth. Even in so small a matter as driving a nail into a plank, hear this same sermon. Your nail must be hard, smooth, fine-pointed, or it will not move swiftly in the direction willed. Imagine then a nail of tinder wood with 20 points. It is verily no longer a nail. Yet nigh all mankind are alike unto this. They wish a dozen different careers, and the force with which one might have been sufficient to attain eminence in one is wasted on the others. They are null, says the man who was at various points in his life a world-class poet, a mountaineer, a prophet, a chess master, a painter, a world traveler. So, yeah.
What a waste of time.
I know. Yeah, while I take the points of his admonition here, I think it's worthwhile to keep it framed as illustrative rather than prescriptive, and that it's okay to explore and experiment. Skipping down a little more. Search yourselves cunningly, I pray you, analyzing your inmost thoughts. And first you shall discard all those gross, obvious hindrances to your will. Idleness, foolish friendships, waste unemployments or enjoyments. I will not enumerate the conspirators against the welfare of your state. So that's the first part of the practice, elimination, eliminating waste, eliminating all of the bits and bobs that are bring small immediate pleasure in some sense, but are in and of themselves obstructions to that greater comprehension of your will. The next step. Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
I'm kind of surprised that he wrote this, because at least the way I'm interpreting it, it conflicts with something he wrote somewhere else about how anything, it might have been Magic Without Tears, anything can be a meditation if you're, as long as you're just looking at it that way. So I don't see what the conflict is personally.
That's an excellent observation, and we'll actually get to that, because this is a process, and there are steps in the process. And the first steps are renunciation. And then once renunciation itself has been mastered to some degree, then it becomes, then your orientation becomes expansive again.
I was just wondering, I mean, the idea that anything could become a meditation, doesn't that require intentionality? As opposed, well, I mean, so our wasteful endeavors are without that focus, that intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of an examination is calling upon. But
Right.
Those same things could serve a useful purpose if they are actually directed with intention.
For sure.
Is what I'm.
Yeah. Once you have the awareness, the self-knowledge that comes from renunciation, then yes, everything becomes grist for the mill at that point.
So I wonder if that's what he's getting at and saying that everything, can be a meditation.
Right. Yeah.
Just going with this theme that he's starting with here, he's offering a diagnostic model for spiritual problems. He's saying that your disease or your problems are arising fundamentally from disunity, from duality. And so the solution to that would be the resolution of duality. And so the way I take this section is that he's saying, start with the sphere of your own existence, of your own ethics. Examine what you can do consistently in an undivided way. That's sort of like the yardstick that he's using here. So, look at yourself and just look at what your own capabilities are. If you can only do something in a half-hearted way, maybe you shouldn't be doing it, right? So maybe you should just stick with those things. So it's like this act of self-reflection and self-understanding and self-diagnosis. It's like, well, what can I do such that my thoughts and my feelings and my deeds are in a line and I'm not ambivalent, right? This goes back to that idea in Magick and Theory and Practice, where he says, like, a country that's divided against itself isn't going to make war against another country. It's not going to do anything competently because it's at civil war. So you want
Its
to
actions are null.
Yeah, you want to start by eliminating the civil war in yourself. And that's only
Right.
something that you can answer for yourself. Like, well, what can I do consistently? What can I put my whole heart and my mind into? So that's kind of what I take this to be. It's very similar to, examining your own capabilities of your own being and reflecting upon yourself and your own powers.
Right. And it's an iterative, incremental, and cyclical process on a practical level, where that there's phases of kind of systole and diastole that we go through with this process as well.
Right. And I see the subsequent sections of this as being like dealing with more comprehensive senses of delusion, right? So you're starting with the delusions that are within your own ethics. And then it becomes like delusions about the universe, right? And about your relationship to God and reality. It gets bigger and bigger with each section until when you get to light, it's just incomprehensible.
Well, that's and that seems to be the message about the paradox of 0 equals 2, is that it is delusion to see 0 and 2 as different, as as different ends of some pole, because they're actually the same. They're actually, it's a circle, or I mean, I don't know how you would graphically represent it, but it's
it's fractal. You're seeing the same pattern repeat on different levels of enormity.
Right. Yeah. And these practices aren't to fix anything in the universe. It's to fix our wrong reckoning of how we fit into the universe and how the universe fits in total. So the next step of renunciation in the practice is find the minimum daily time which is in good sooth necessary to your natural life, and the rest you shall devote to the true means of your attainment. So figure out the minimum time that it takes to, eat and get rid of what you've eaten, and all of the bare necessities in our contemporary world. That often includes a great deal of things around working to get money to pay rent and mortgages, and all of those probably end up fitting into the minimum daily time, which does not necessarily leave a lot of time left after that. But pare that down, strip away what, challenge yourself as to what you think is necessary to sustain yourself, to make that minimum, and see if you can take away more, to make more availability and remove more distraction from the pursuit of the beloved.
I'm going to pop in real quick too, with a thought that I had, just looking back on my own life's experiences, and how many times I've been, just like all of us, forced to do that thing that I have to do for the moment that's not necessarily my will, only to discover later on, when I do find my will and I do start doing my will, that all those mundane little experiences, I wouldn't be able to do my will now had I not learned the little things that I learned. And it's very fucking serious. I mean, all those times that I spent just off just being miserable in this job or that job, and this is not what I want to do, I still learned. And if you approach life from that respect, you'll just be that much more armored when you do find your will to devote yourself to that, because of the lessons that you've learned. And hopefully once you find your will, you won't have to stop and go back and learn a lesson that you forgot to pick up before that you need now, you know?
Yeah.
A second thing, and just for some of the folks who are maybe newer with all of this, can you touch a little bit more on exactly the 0 = 2 equation, and what is exactly meant by that?
No. But I can give some more illustrations. You know, one of the classic presentations that Crowley gives of 0 = 2 is that it's depicting that. Well, and he goes in later on in this essay, in the section on light, he talks about how it's absurd that something arises from nothing. So of course, everything's really just nothing. And in a mathematical expression of 0 = 2, it's often drawn out as, you know, the number 0 equals, and then 2 is broken down as -1 plus +1, where it's a pun, you know, an equational pun, where you have 2 1s, and it's just that one's a +1, one's a -1. They cancel each other out and produce 0. So the whole totality of motion and matter in the universe is 0. It's just that it's 0. It's a very active 0. They all cancel one another out. But how that produces our experience, I don't have great insight into, other than, you know, through the illusion of time and causality, because of lagginess in this perception of nullity, we perceive phenomena, because not everything happens at once according to our senses, even though everything is happening at once, ostensibly, not regarding our senses. I mean, that's gibberish. So
can I I wanted to ask, kind of like when you brought up the equation, it kind of made me think of like your positive experience and your negative experiences, and how all those come together. And I was just kind of thinking about like how some of those, like how Steve was saying, was like all those other things he had to go through in order to be able to do his will wouldn't have happened if he hadn't gone through them. And it just kind of makes me feel like, you know, when you're about to step on the path, whether you start out intentionally or not, it's interesting, just like those experiences, those extreme negatives, those maybe those things that you need to cull out of your daily to kind of refine yourself to become the vessel that is, you know, able to receive the divine, and to be able to receive that, to kind of just get on to the path of will. And I'm just thinking about it, and it just kind of like having that balance and being able to bring all that together to create what then becomes your like finite will and who you are, until you dissolve
Right.
into Nuit later on.
Right. Well, it's easy to have pleasant experiences and think, oh, this is divine. You know, any idiot can do that. You know, that's not the challenge, is to have like nice, happy experiences and, you know, feel like it's holy. You know, it's not hard to have an orgasm and feel like, wow, this is amazing. That's the easy part. The hard part is stepping away from that moment of and those experiences of bliss, and trying to remain poised and critical of it. And then contrary wise, on the other side of that, to have awful experiences, to have tragedy and pain, and have the poise and equanimity to find what's holy in it. You know, to look at you know, all those sides and bring them together. You know, the you know, ostensibly all of experience, all of creation, and that's one of the main points of this text is the divine. And so to partition out some of those elements and say this is not holy is an affront to that process. So it very much takes those emotionally troubling experiences and the emotionally elated experiences, all of that together to synthesize into the perception of and mastery of these qualities. Yeah, very much.
Would it be okay if I tried to say something about zero?
Sure.
Okay, I hope this doesn't go on too long. It might be a little bit of a tangent, but okay. As far as I've been able to gather from like the science sector, I don't have a citation here, so you know everybody's going to need to double check what I'm about to say. I might be off, but I think that there's a theory of the Big Bang where it supposedly was a matter-antimatter explosion, where you know the matter is the one, the antimatter is the negative one. When they come together, they blow up. But the finer point of this is that, you know, if everything blew up, then we would actually have nothing left. So the idea is that there were unequal amounts of each, even though we can't measure them. And whatever didn't get negated by the negative one, you know, we still have some matter left over. We've still got some of this one stuff. And there's probably only a little tiny bit of it compared to how much there was before, since, you know, most of it went up in the blast. But the point is that now that we've got this one stuff, that becomes the basis for all the rest of the matter in the expanding universe. So but it no longer has its negative one, because all that was expended, or at least the very, very, very vast majority of it's to the point where it's really hard to find a piece of antimatter. So we don't necessarily just have positive matter, we just have matter. This becomes the new zero, the new baseline. So my point is that the concept of nothing and the concept of zero are different. Nothing means literally you don't have anything, but zero is just a point of reference on what we do have.
There's a similar disposition around the fourth power of the Sphinx of silence, where our perception of silence is merely a norm around what we typically experience compared to loudness. And so when, you know, the kind of in the abstract, when the word of the magus is absorbed into silence, it's a way of saying that perturbation of the word, that expression, becomes so pervasive that it is then perceived by the world as the background silence of how life plays out after the enunciation of that word. It sounds similar to what you're saying. It becomes the new zero, even though it didn't start off as a zero compared to the last state of silence. It becomes the new state of silence.
Yeah, Clay, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So here, this section kind of wraps up several of the points that that you all have been bringing up, and I'm going to read through it, and it's one of the more poetic sections here. It shall not be very long before you come to understand that such a life is true liberty, the life of renunciation. You will feel distractions from your will as being what they are. They will no longer appear pleasant and attractive, but as bonds, as shames. And when you have attained this point, know that you have passed the middle gate of this path, not the end, the middle, for you will have unified your will. Even thus, were a man sitting in a theater where the play wearies him, he would welcome every distraction and find amusement in any accident. But if he were intent upon the play, every such incident would annoy him. His attitude to these is then an indication of his attitude toward the play itself. At first, the habit of attention is hard to acquire. Persevere, and you will have spasms of revulsion periodically. Reason itself will attack you, saying, how can so strict a bondage be the path of freedom? Persevere. You have never yet known liberty. When the temptations are overcome, the voice of reason silenced, then will your soul bound forward unhampered upon its chosen course. And for the first time will you experience the extreme delight of being master of yourself, and therefore of the universe. When this is fully attained, when you sit securely in the saddle, then you may enjoy also all those distractions which first pleased you and then angered you. Now they will do neither anymore, for they are your slaves and toys. Until you have reached this point, you are not wholly free. You must kill out desire and kill out fear. The end of all is the power to live according to your own nature, without danger that one part may develop to the detriment of the whole, or concern lest that danger should arise. The sot drinks and is drunken. The coward drinks not and shivers. The wise man, brave and free, drinks and gives glory to the Most High God. This then is the law of liberty. You possess all liberty in your own right, but you must buttress right with might. You must win freedom for yourself in many a war. Woe unto the children who sleep in the freedom that their forefathers won for them. So does that speak to a lot of your comments and questions, it seems? Nick, that seemed to address part of the comment that you were making.
I think so. It sounds exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Any more comments?
Does it mean that this, I mean, we live in such a permissive culture. Do you think that maybe this this becomes a harder path to follow?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Crowley had something to struggle against. There's a certain virtue in that, I think.
Right. It's, I think, a challenge for our age, and compared to Crowley, especially when, like in this next section on love, part of it is addressing transgression and using the power and energy of transgression as a means of emancipation. And we have a lot less to transgress in our age. The norms are so liberal that I mean, oftentimes it is restriction itself that becomes the transgression. It's the
Crowley would find a way, I'm sure.
He would. He was a master.
I think there could be,
No.
quite a bit of transgression. I mean, culturally, we're in the midst of a new civil rights, movement coming up that hasn't, it's been pacified and not resolved, and really being forced to look at these things that we thought were no longer problems, and trying to figure out solutions and ways to come at it from a different manner, because it's obvious that the ways of before were not working. And so,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
it's just showing that there's a lot that can still apply from that time to today.
Mhm.
We aren't lost in like modernism from antiquity. It's not, the ideals behind the work is still very much in the forefront today.
Yeah. I mean, there's still much need for liberation, for sure. Yeah. I was more speaking that, like from Crowley's experiments in Cefalù, with the mystery of filth that he explored, and a lot of, I think, his emphasis on particular types of sex magic are the efficacy of those in his life, I think, was in large part due to their taboo, and breaking that taboo. And we don't have as many of those to struggle against.
Except, well,
Go ahead.
I would just point out though that many of us carry taboos. I mean, it's lovely to see the world at large in kind of that wide open space,
Mhm.
but still, so many of us have experiences that instill those taboos.
That's
I mean,
a really good point.
speaking from my own experience,
Mhm.
and not wanting to overshare, but I was part of a, like many others to come to Thelema, I was part of a very strict religious tradition.
Mhm.
I had only ever had any sexual activity with one person to whom I had been married for 18 years. And I can tell you, when I chose to leave that tradition and make changes in my life and came out of the closet, I was a whore.
Right.
I mean, I was
There's a huge
extremely,
taboo to come up
yeah,
against.
yeah. I mean, I was extremely indulgent.
Mhm.
And what I found in my own experience is I think I had to go through that to then find my equilibrium.
Mhm.
And it's sort of funny because I am, like 99.9% monogamous as to intimacy at this point,
Uh-huh.
by choice. But I had to violate, I had to act in that transgressive manner, even to extreme.
Right. You found all of that bound up energy, and
Yeah.
and then use that to propel your own liberation. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I guess
not having,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point, that even as a total culture, though the taboos may be falling away, the as individuals, we still have plenty. So, part of that process of rooting through those, as described in the section on love here, is seeking those out, and finding opportunities to use those as tools for your own liberation. More comments before we read a little bit more? Okay. Of love. It is written that love is the law, love under will. Herein is an arcanum concealed, for in the Greek language, agape, love, is of the same numerical value as thelema, will. By this we understand that the universal will is of the nature of love. Now love is the enkindling in ecstasy of two that will to become one. It is thus a universal formula of high magic. Foresee now how all things, being in sorrow caused by individuality, must of necessity will oneness as their medicine. Here also is nature monitor to them that seek wisdom at her breast. For in the uniting of elements of opposite polarities is there a glory of heat, of light, and of electricity. Thus also in mankind do we behold the spiritual fruit of poetry and all genius arising from the seed of what is but an animal gesture, in the estimation of such as are schooled in philosophy. And it is to be noted strongly that the most violent and divine passions are those between people of utterly unharmonious natures. But now I would have you know that in the mind there are no such limitations in respect of species as prevent a man falling in love with an inanimate object or an idea. For to him that is in any wise advanced upon the way of meditation, it appears that all objects save the one object are distasteful, even as appeared formerly in respect of his chance wishes to the will. So therefore all objects must be grasped by the mind and heated in the sevenfold furnace of love until with explosion of ecstasy they unite and disappear, for they, being imperfect, are destroyed utterly in the creation of the perfection of union, even as the persons of the lover and the beloved are fused into the spiritual gold of love, which knoweth no person but comprehendeth all. So we're starting to get a sense here of how 0 = 2 plays into this particular facet of the pyramid. It's, in liberty, it was the illusion of the self versus the non-self, and in love, it is the illusion of self versus all, as this. And I don't know exactly how to qualify the distinction between all and not self. That seems a subtle point that is I don't have an easily I don't know how to draw out that distinction.
I might frame it slightly differently. Like I would
What's
say
that?
that the issue with liberty is how to be undivided with yourself in terms of your actions and your deeds, whereas the issue with love is between yourself and another thing or another person or another entity or idea.
I guess that's, yeah, okay. I mean, the self and not self in liberty is more of, going back to that process of an elimination and renunciation. It's getting rid of the parts of you that you think are yourself that are not, or that you engage with as if they were part of yourself, but truly are not. Whereas this is the orientation of yourself as it relates to the rest of external beings.
Yeah, to something else, to something ostensibly outside of yourself.
Outside of yourself. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. This also, I think, brings up relation to another epigram from Liber Aleph again. This is, and it's there's a series of epigrams in this book illustrating this doctrine of poison and the value of seeking out things that seem toxic or harmful, and using your sense of balance, poise, equanimity to resolve those poisons so that they are no longer other but are in fact you. So I'm going to read this quickly. De venenis, on poisons. My son, if thou fast a while, there shall come unto thee a second state of psychological being, in which is a delight passive and equable, without will, a contentment of weakness, with a feeling of lightness and of purity. And this is because the blood hath absorbed in its need of nutriment all foreign elements. Such also is the case with the mind, which hath not fed itself on thought. Consider the placid and ruminant existence of such persons as read little, are removed from worldly struggle by some sufficient property of small and unexciting value, stably invested, and by age and environment are free from passion. They live according to their own nature without desire, and they oppose no resistance to their operations of time. Such are called happy, and in their way of vegetable life it is so, for they are free of any poison. So here he's being snarky and criticizing people who live lives of simplicity, not of renunciation, but a simplicity from an absence of reflection, from simply taking the most simply resolvable elements and sustaining yourself weakly based on that. You know, not living a life that seeks out poison, that and tries to go through the work of resolving those.
Is that like the men he describes who seek out mediocre women versus the ones who look for absolute horrible monsters to absolutely destroy them?
Yeah, that's
So
I think here in the next couple
is that where you were
paragraphs
going with this?
Yeah. Where is that?
It's like it's like a couple paragraphs after that.
Yeah. Here we go. Yet since each star is but one star, and the coming together of any two is but one partial rapture, so must the aspirant to our holy science and art increase constantly by this method of assimilating ideas, that in the end become capable of apprehending the universe in one thought. He may leap forward upon it with the massed violence of his self, and destroying both these become that unity whose name is no thing. Seek ye all therefore constantly to unite yourselves in rapture with each and every thing that is, and that by utmost passion and lust of union. To this end, take chiefly all such things as are naturally repulsive. For what is pleasant is assimilated easily and without ecstasy. It is in the transfiguration of the loathsome and abhorred into the beloved that the self is shaken to the root in love. Thus in human love also we see that mediocrities among men mate with null women. But history teacheth us that the supreme masters of the world seek ever the vilest and most horrible creatures for their concubines, overstepping even the limiting laws of sex and species in their necessity to transcend normality. It is not enough in such natures to excite lust or passion. The imagination itself must be inflamed by every means. So, yeah. I mean, I guess we still have taboos against interspecies joinings that we can tap into if people are lacking personal taboo that he's talking about here. And yeah, again, a lot of this kind of comes back to his experiments with the mystery of filth that he enjoined during his time in the Abbey of Thelema. So that's one part of the practice of around love is this uniting yourself with that which is abhorrent, seeking it out and trying to absorb that to overcome your repulsion. I think that goes back to, in terms of having negative emotional experiences as well. It's not just physical repulsion that he's talking about here, but it's those emotionally difficult experiences that also need to be sought out and let them shake love at its root.
There's also that passage in Liber 5 where he talks about the magician must devise for himself a method of destroying evil, which is very similar to this, and the end goal of which is to just appreciate everything as it is in its own right.
Huh. Interesting. I haven't read Reguli in ages, so I'm
Yeah, it's in the like extended commentary that he has
commentary.
at the back of it. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, because that is supposedly the ritual that orients one toward the what is
New
it,
Aeon, right.
animadversion toward the new Aeon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I
So
think the theme is that every experience is new wheat. Everything is the beloved. That's sort of
Right.
the terminus of it.
Yeah, it's all the same. Our ability to perceive it otherwise is just an artifact of our delusion.
Right.
So there's another part of the practice of love, and it's long and complicated. So I'm just going to kind of summarize that. Where there's a particular form of meditation that demands fixing your attention on one particular focus, and then using that focus to simplify thought and try to understand thoughts as simple in the sense of not interconnected. They're the kind of atomic thoughts that don't really bear in relation to other thoughts. They are atomic in their nature, and to then maintain a sense of detachment from the content and structure of those thoughts, where that they are disentangled and become acausal in relation to each other. They're no longer like one thought does not lead to the next. It's a way of divesting that the notion of I mean, intent. Is intent the right word? I mean, to me, it speaks more about ridding oneself of the notion of causality, which kind of makes me think of in the let's see if I think I have it here. In the Vision and the Voice, there's in the 19th ether, there's this description. It's kind of an odd picture of the alphabet of daggers, which I guess you could is a useful magical tool for some purpose, but it's more interesting the way that it's used to describe who uses it. It says here, and the writing is, and this is what's written in the alphabet of daggers: worship in the body the things of the body, worship in the mind the things of the mind, worship in the spirit the things of the spirit. Keep the planes organized in their own way. This holy alphabet must be written by sinners, that is, by those who are impure. Impure means those whose every thought is followed by another thought, or who confuse the higher with the lower, the substance with the shadow. Every ether is truth, though it be but a shadow, for the shadow of a man is not the shadow of an ape. So it's again talking about that sense of of impurity, or that state of sin, which if we look at Heart of the Master, it goes on at length about what sin is in the Thelemic conjecture. It's ignorance. It's not understanding your true will, and having a sense of separateness from that. And that is the impurity that is being sought against in this practice of the meditative practice of love, is to purify by disconnecting from that one thought leads to the next, one thing leads to the next. There's trying to cultivate a sense that all things exist at once, rather than in time series or in relation to space. Joe, I'm curious. I mean, you studied Buddhism considerably. Is there a similar meditation practice that in the Buddhist traditions?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I think what he had in mind here is what's called vipassana meditation. He refers to it as mahasatipatthana.
Yeah.
It's in that when he talks about analysis of ideas or analysis of impressions, that's probably what he has in mind. He learned that from Alan Bennett. So the section concludes, but each idea will possess one special quality common to all, this, that no one of any of them is the self, and as much as it is perceived by the self as something opposite. Like, it's a very like Vipassana-y sort of observation. Like, you can have thoughts, and if you could notice a thought going through your head the same way that you would notice like a bird flying through the sky, you're not confused when you see a bird. Like, you know that it's not you, but we identify ourselves with our thoughts.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. It does have kind of I mean, I've only read and practiced Vipassana a bit, but that kind of resonates with my limited understanding of it as well. And the ultimate end of this practice, he goes on to say, is once you've identified this all, these things that are, you as you find these thoughts, you recognize that these are not you, because you're the thinker, not the thought. And once you have thoroughly identified this not self, this all, then you project your will to love, onto this sense of all. That first that all has to be identified, and then it is to be loved. Where's that at here? Yeah, when this is thorough and profound in the impact of its realization, then is the moment for the aspirant to direct his will to love upon it, so that his whole consciousness findeth focus upon that one idea. And at the first, it may be fixed and dead or lightly held. And this may pass into dryness or into repulsion. Then at last, by pure persistence in that act of will to love, shall love himself arise as a bird, as a flame, as a song, and the whole soul shall wing a fiery path of music unto the ultimate heaven of possession. And then the latter part, the remainder of this section on love is mostly a meditation on human love and the wiliness of how love presents itself, the play and dance of love. That it's not a simple process, that there is a courtship and all of the confusing and maddening and delightful parts of that come with the courtship that we find in human love, in interpersonal love between humans, and that process, that the mystery of that is a gift in that it makes it's fuel for being inflamed in that devotion and love, that love of the beloved. That were there only simplicity, it would be, again, kind of a null sense of what the experience could be, rather than an ecstatic one. Comments or questions or anything from folks? What time is it here? Oh, it's almost, so I guess we wrap this up at 6, so we have 13 minutes left. That is not much time. Okay. Go on to life. I guess I'll be brief in summary. The 0 equals 2 of life is life and death. That those are different things. That what we think of as our life, which most of us think of this time right now where we're here on Earth as being life, and then the time when we're not on Earth as death. That this is, again, illusion. That there is a timeless, eternal, no beginning, no end self that projects through life and death as a thread of continuity. That it is the very first words here are systole and diastole, which when used with in its most typical usage describes the heartbeat. It's the squeezing of the blood through the heart, and then the relaxation of the heart to then bring in more blood from the vascular system, the pulse of that. And the life is the squeezing, it's the pulse, and then the diastole is the release of that, the relaxation of that. But it's one heart, it's one circulation, it's one flow of blood. And we are advised to not confuse the life that is eternal and one with the life of here and now. That we have these various expressions of life and these various experiences of death throughout our timeless existence, in order to have variety of experience, and in order to participate and express our will in an infinite variety of contexts. The practices of life are described as 2 different methods. The first is developing the magical memory, which Crowley says is very hard, and you probably shouldn't try it because you'll fail and you'll be frustrated, and then you'll give up and probably just sit around and eat Cheetos all day. So don't try that. And then if you read more about the magical memory and like Liber CL, you'll see that there are even multiple methods of engaging in the magical memory. But don't, because it's not recommended. The recommended, what he calls the surer path, is the mastery of the body of light, is traveling upon the astral and rising through the planes into ever more refined airs of existence and perception, and recommends a series of practices around how to master this body of light, and what to expect as you meet different stages of it. And whereas the danger of the magical memory is in failure and the dejectedness that comes in failing it repeatedly, the danger in mastering the astral body, or the body of light and astral travel, is success and the delusion that comes from easy success, because you're not necessarily applying the discipline to be sure of your results, and can just fall into fantasy rather than the actual experience of refining the body of light.
I had a question. When you talk about like refining the body of light, in Liber Crowley says like the marriage of both the light and the dark, bringing those together and not just seeking after the one and forgetting about the other, kind of considering it, or in so many words, makes it seem like that's kind of a failure to not acknowledge the other. What are your thoughts about like the other aspect, the other part, the shadow, in a sense, when you're aspiring to this mastery of the body of light? Is that also in correlation with like with learning how to master the shadow, or is it completely different?
That's a really fascinating question. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that, other than, I mean, the other practices for light, life, love, and liberty address more, because the body of light is kind of diverges from materiality, whereas the other practices in and of themselves address materiality. So I don't know if there's a body of shadow that's different from gross physical matter.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have a body of shadow, I would suggest that it might be your physical body.
Yeah.
To a spiritual body of light, a non-corporeal body. That would be.
I'm trying to think if Crowley mentions some other like non-material body of shadow, or some correlate like that, and I'm not coming up with anything.
I mean, yeah, some sort of connection to the clephotic or something.
Yeah, if you want to stay in the realm of Kabbalah, yeah.
Mhm.
And all right, since we're running out of time, I'm just going to skip ahead to light. And again, as I talked about a bit in the beginning, introducing this, for light, there isn't a specific practice, and it's the perfection of the other three in harmony with one another begins to build the emergent awareness and mastery of light. And the description as to what this is, he spends a lot of words saying, people try all the time to describe what light is, and they fail. And then he spends a lot of words trying to say what it is. And basically, my take is that he's saying you'll know it when you see it, sort of thing. That as you develop this awareness, you'll have this kind of inductive experience where that your perception will start to resonate with light, which is not to be, he's careful to point out light isn't like the light of like a light bulb or the sun specifically. It's sun and it's light and not light. It is both light and darkness. It is the principle of the possibility of light. And that there's an emergent awareness that develops as this goes on. He ends with some interesting further attributions. He talks about which holy books each of these 5 L's belongs to, or I mean, belongs to. I mean, it's all the holy books encapsulate all of light, life, love, liberty, and our expressions of the law. But they are principal references for a specific one. And those are the 5 books of the original publication, the 1909 publication of Thelema. And they're the 5 books that are required for memorization by aspirants to AA, where the law is, of course, Liber Legis, the book of the law, is the corresponding text for that principle. For liberty, there is Trigrammaton, the book of words of 3, or the book of words of 3 letters. For love, obviously, the book of the heart girt with the serpent is the principal text on that. For life, it's Liber Liberi, the Emancipated. And for light, it's Ararita. So it's helpful to, again, revisit those holy books with that framework in mind and to understand how they knit together. Then he also goes into expressions of evil and how these 5 the 4 principles are undermined. And this was explored for liberty somewhat already, talking about idleness and incoherence, how that is the mode of evil that interferes with the perception of and expression of liberty. For love, it's being shut up in oneself. Like the Black Brothers are described as having shut up in their hearts, shut their blood up in their hearts, unable to connect with the outside world. For life, it's to perceive causality and time. And for light, the expression of evil, the interference, is to prefer one expression of the universe to another, or to confuse the planes. I think there's one more note in here. It's too long. But if you want to read it, there's on the mystery of evil in Liber Aleph that speaks to this. And then he closes with how the magical weapons tie into these 4: light, life, love, and liberty, where the liberty is the wand, will, fire, love is the cup, water, life is the dagger, and light is the disc. And that concludes the book, the Lege Libellum. Did anyone have more comments? Can take just a couple more minutes here. Comments or questions?
Mainly just thank you. That's good.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Very excellent presentation.
Yeah.
Nice discussion.
I would love to see you do this with more pieces like this in the future, Clay.
Yeah, I love talking about the books and kind of reading them together and seeing how they tie together, especially as the they have such strong bearing upon one another. It's useful to see how they interrelate.
Love to see more of them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Yeah,
all
this is
for
great. Thank
your
you.
attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your input. Really appreciate it. And with that, love is the law. Love under will.